Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, January the 17th, 2025. My apologies, but I feel I do need to have another look at Meghan Markle's horoscope. I mean, I did look at her chart just a few days ago, but I've been thinking a lot about her chart. I mean, I do actually find her chart really interesting. You know, she's born in California. We've got an exact time. She's always in the news, and there are questions about her behavior. For example, in light of the recent fire in Los Angeles, she has been accused of visiting the scene of a fire inappropriately, even being accused of being a disaster tourist. Now, from my subjective perspective, her behavior doesn't seem right, but I don't want to go onto this outrage trip. You know, there are lots of YouTubers showing total outrage about what she did. Why did she visit this fire so quickly afterwards? And we remember in 2022, I think it was with the Uvalde shooting in Texas, she visited Uvalde very soon after the event. And again, the accusation is that she's taking a tragedy and she's using it for her publicity purposes. And I don't know what the truth of the matter is, but there seems to be a sense with Meghan that she's making a lot of mistakes and that she seems to be insensitive to the consequences of what she's doing. I mean, maybe she's perfectly sensitive, but I was just curious about her horoscope and what it is about that chart that is encouraging her to do what she's doing. And so what I wanted to do with that question in mind is really have another look at her chart, and maybe I'm going to try to get into her chart, really in depth. I'm probably flattering myself. It's very difficult to get into a chart in depth in these videos. I just have 20 minutes, half an hour at the end. I mean, one could spend days on Meghan's chart, so yeah, it's probably not going to be an in-depth look at her chart, but I really wanted to have another look at it, have a look at her midpoints. Also, I wanted to have a look at her father's chart. I don't have a time of birth for her father, but that might also tell us something. Anyway, before I look at Meghan Markle's chart, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is January the 17th, 2025. If you like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to, because it does make a big difference to the channel. Anyway, let's look at what's happening today in terms of the astrology and the I Ching. So here is a chart for today, Friday at noon, New York time, and we have the moon in Virgo. The moon was starting to move into Virgo yesterday, and now it's very much there. Doesn't matter what your time zone is. We've got the moon in this sign. So you will see from that chart there are now no planets in fire signs, unless you count Chiron, which in terms of elemental balances I don't. And so with no planets in fire signs, it just feels as if maybe the spark has gone. There may be something missing a little bit. And, where is the action? And so, that is perhaps a bit of a downer. On the other hand, we've got plenty of earth and water. You can see that we've got the moon in Virgo, Mercury in Capricorn, Sun in Capricorn, aside from Uranus in Taurus, and then we've got Mars, Venus, Saturn, and Neptune in water signs. So the only two positive planets, i.e. planets in air and fire, when of course there's nothing in fire, so we've got just Jupiter and Pluto. And so there is a sense in which today is somewhat receptive. We are responding to what is happening around us. It's not perhaps a day for reacting. And the moon is in Virgo, and the moon in Virgo is quite a service-orientated sign. It responds perhaps to outside needs, and also moon in Virgo is sensitive to whatever is happening in the wider environment, and that can include pollution, chemicals, bad vibes even. So that's moon in Virgo, and the moon in Virgo is making an opposition aspect to Saturn. It's also making a square to Jupiter, and I would have said the moon opposition Saturn is probably going to be more noticeable than the moon square Jupiter. I mean, it's very stark. Moon in Virgo opposition Saturn in Pisces, and so this moon Saturn opposition can be about something holding us back, or we feel we can't say everything we'd like to say. Perhaps we have a feeling that maybe we've missed our moment, or perhaps our moment hasn't arrived. Okay, the moon is also making a square to Jupiter, so what happens is the moon makes it square to Jupiter. So moon square Jupiter, that might be all the things we'd like to be doing. There's a certain excitement with moon square Jupiter, but then straight away moon moves on to opposition of Saturn, and we have to deal with reality. And that moon square Jupiter, moon opposition Saturn, there can be a bit of a stop-go feel about today. Go is the Jupiter, stop is the Saturn, and it just may be difficult to see things through. Now, there are a couple of other aspects of note. Moon is trine Mercury. So moon trine moon in Virgo, trine Mercury in Capricorn. That does mean that we are able to articulate ourselves, articulate our thoughts, not in a dramatic way, in a slow and considered fashion, and it just takes us a bit of time to get our message across. But if we go about things in the right way, we should be able to get people to understand what's on our mind. But overall, there's not a huge amount happening today, and I would have said the main aspect is that moon opposition Saturn. Also, you could say it's moon opposition Venus, because we now are very close to a conjunction between Venus and Saturn. You can see that Venus is at 1448 Pisces, Saturn at Venus at 1448, Venus at 1448, Saturn at 1558. So by the weekend we will have that conjunction between Venus and Saturn, and then the moon is picking it up. The moon is not just making that opposition to Saturn, but the moon is also making an opposition to Venus. So because of the moon, we may really feel that Venus-Saturn conjunction. And so with Saturn receiving sort of hard aspects from Moon and Venus, that is a bit tough. And it may feel that there isn't much sympathy around. At least that may be how we feel at first. I don't think that's necessarily the truth, but some people might be just holding back on their feelings. And Venus-Saturn can work in many ways. I mean, Venus-Saturn can be very responsible, can make sure that feelings don't get out of control, but at the same time, feelings can get squelched. And so we need to be aware of that. And if we feel upset or hurt, or we feel a little bit ignored, then don't take it to heart. This Venus-Saturn conjunction will become exact over the weekend, but by next week it will pass. So whatever's going on in terms of relationships and connections with other human beings, don't feel that it's the end of the world if you're snubbed or you're ignored, because this is a temporary situation. Next week, things will be different. Now, that is the picture in New York. One other thing, I don't know whether it's remotely relevant, but Pluto is conjunct a fixed star called Albireo within a 1 minute orb, and I don't really normally think about Pluto and fixed stars, but I looked at Vivian Robson, and he seemed to regard Albireo as a fairly dignified star. I mean, not unfortunate. It's somewhat sensitive. He says about Albireo, what he says about this star. He doesn't say a lot about Albireo, and it's in the constellation of the Swan, and he says a topaz, yellow, and sapphire blue binary or double star situated on the head of the Swan, symbolized as I mean, he says, I don't know where he got it from, as the song of the dying swan. And he says it's of the nature of Venus and Mercury. It gives a handsome appearance, neatness, a lovable disposition, and beneficence in despair. Now, that's kind of interesting. Beneficence in despair. So when things are really bad, one can perhaps be generous. And because Pluto is involved, it may be that sort of generosity coming in at the last moment, perhaps in a moment of despair, can actually have a transformative impact. I mean, that's one possibility. And then the song of the dying swan. What's Pluto doing? How do you really associate Pluto with the song of a dying swan? One, I suppose, has to think about endings. Do we feel that it is a time of endings, that something that has been enjoyed for a long time is now coming to an end? Is this something cultural, that it is time to accept that something is ending, something is finished? I mean, Pluto is in early Aquarius and mourning the past. I mean, I'm not going to say that means anything, Pluto and the song of the dying swan, but it might just be something for you to think about. And in terms of Australia and New Zealand, if we look at the chart for Sydney, Australia, Sydney as a representative of Australia and New Zealand, the moon is at 4 Virgo. So it is earlier in Virgo, and I suppose that emphasises a point, but in Australia and New Zealand, the moon is going to be in Virgo pretty much all day. Okay, might go into Virgo really early in the morning. Perhaps if you're in Australia and New Zealand, you won't pick up on the Moon-Saturn opposition as much as you would if you were in, say, the Australias or Europe. So maybe it's going to be a slightly easier day in Australia and New Zealand, where there will be a bit less pressure and more choice, more freedom, not feeling that you're so restricted or even ignored. So I would have said, on balance, a fairly similar day in Australia and New Zealand compared to Australia and Europe, but perhaps an easier day. Then there is the heliocentric picture, and I've got nothing really new to report heliocentrically, because the situation is fairly similar from what it was yesterday. We still have a Mars-Earth conjunction. That Mars-Earth conjunction is a sextile Uranus, so that aspect, it does stir things up to some extent, and there's scope for things happening. I mean, we're still feeling that Earth-Mars conjunction, or if you want to be geocentric about it, that Sun opposition Mars. We're still feeling it, and there is a sense of drama that things could happen. But aside from that, I don't think there's anything new there that I want to talk about. I mean, Mercury is starting to make an opposition of Venus, but that Mercury opposition Venus and perhaps some of the creativity of a Mercury-Venus opposition is probably not going to come in until the weekend. So really, that's it, heliocentrically, and I want to now look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, January the 17th, 2025. Aries. Aries, it's another day where you probably want to do things in your own way, and you don't necessarily feel that you want to make waves. I mean, you might like to make waves, but you know at some level that there's no point. Well, I mean, okay, there always might be a point. I mean, who knows? But there's nothing in fire signs. Even if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon is out of Leo. So with that lack of fire and the moon moving through Virgo, it might be just a time to deal with what's in front of you in a fairly no-nonsense kind of way. Not in a way, I would have said, that was typically Aries. So it might be a good idea to just consider, what do you want to achieve this Friday? And go through, if you like, the bullet points. You want to achieve this, this, and this. Get through it, and don't feel that you have to be excited about what you're doing, because I think there could be just something that is fundamentally rather routine about it all. Now, there may be moments where you want to say something, you've got something on your mind, and you want to talk about it, but is anyone going to listen to you? It's not a great day for being listened to unless you are very specific. So if you have some idea, some inspiration, and you want to talk about it, I don't think anyone's going to care. On the other hand, if you have a precise observation to make, especially if this observation relates to other people's interests, especially their material interests, if you make that observation and it's carefully crafted, then I think that you will get noticed, because at the moment people are quite materialistic. They want to make sure everything is right. If you suggest that something is not right, and you do it in a constructive way, not in a dramatic way, and you do it that way, then you can get people's attention. And that would especially apply in terms of work. People want to get ahead. People want to get their work done. They don't want to make mistakes. And so, with Moon trine Mercury, you say something. You suggest that, for example, if something isn't done, something will go wrong. So it might be the case, Aries, that if you want to have an impact, you should be maybe trying to destabilize people very subtly, but by the use of concrete facts. Concrete facts is the way forward. And making observations about small things that someone might have got wrong. So this is not typical Aries behavior. You kind of have to behave a bit like a Virgo. I mean, obviously you're not a Virgo, but if you can be very precise today, I think that your interests will be well served. And you shouldn't expect anyone to overreact. People will react appropriately, but I don't think you're going to get overreaction. I mean, the only person that might try to overreact is you, because of that Moon square Jupiter. Moon square Jupiter might be about you, trying to create something, some excitement, but I don't think that's going to work. And put another way, in terms of getting people to behave and do things your way, I would have said that the stick is probably going to work better than the carrot. I mean, if you are excited about things, if you look at all the things, good things that could happen, you have wonderful ideas, that's going to probably be ignored. On the other hand, if you look at how things could go wrong, and you're very precise about how things can go wrong, then you might get some attention. And while you're at it, do pay attention to other people and try to understand what's going on in their mind and in their heart as well, because Venus is making a conjunction to Saturn, and with that Venus conjunction to Saturn, there's a possibility that someone is upset about something's bothering them, and they don't really want to talk about it, but still, at some level, you can feel it. And that means that if someone responds to you in an uncharacteristically negative way, rather than see it as a personal rebuff, you should ask yourself why. Why did someone behave in the way they behaved? What is their underlying motive? Or indeed, what is their underlying state of mind? And so be sympathetic, be questioning. Can you help? I'm not sure if you can necessarily help right now. I think it's going to be easier in a day or two's time when the moon moves into Libra. I don't know, when does the moon move into Libra? Moon moves into Libra pretty soon. I think the moon moves into Libra on the 19th. So the 19th, actually that's not until, not really until next week, not next week. So early on the 19th, 18th, 17th, 18th, hold on, let me get this right, 16th, 17th, no, that's over the weekend. Saturday, Sunday, the moon will move into Libra. And so when the moon moves into Libra, when the moon moves into your opposite sign, I think you'll have a better chance of being able to really understand and interact with people in terms of what might be bothering them. But for the moment, it just might be a question of observing and trying to work out what might be concerning someone, and just being open to that possibility. So just be aware of how people behave, and don't take things at face value. It's not about you. It's not about you feeling offended by another person's standoffish behavior. It's about you perhaps trying to understand why someone might be being standoffish. Taurus, Venus is starting to move towards a conjunction to Saturn, and it's getting really close. And this Venus conjunct Saturn could well affect you. It might be that you're starting to feel a little bit negative, feeling that maybe things aren't going to work out. Now, this is a perception. I must make this clear. I'm not telling you that things won't work out. There's just a negativity creeping in here, and it's just difficult to see the alternatives. And that is the nature of Venus conjunct Saturn. At least it's one manifestation. I mean, let's perhaps start with the most difficult manifestation of Venus conjunct Saturn. Venus is you. It's running into a conjunction of Saturn, feeling that you're hitting a brick wall in terms of your social life, for example, it just might be that nothing seems to be going on. People who used to be happy and enthusiastic, they're just more sober and more down to earth, and it may not be especially pleasant. So don't dwell on things too much, and don't think that just because, as far as you're concerned, nothing is happening, that the future looks a little difficult in the short term. Don't think that's necessarily the case, because Saturn could be changing your perceptions. It may be taking something that is in itself quite harmless, could be going anywhere, but Saturn says no, it can't happen, and it's encouraging you to think like that. And it really is important that you don't take it personally. This Venus conjunct Saturn is going to affect everyone. It just says something about the state of things as they are for all the 12 signs. But because Venus is your ruler, you might take it personally. Now, that's one way of looking at Venus conjunct Saturn, seeing it in the most negative light. An alternative approach to Venus conjunct Saturn might be to say, well, Venus is about structure, and it gives you an opportunity to structure things. And Saturn actually has a certain sympathy with Venus, because Saturn is in Pisces, and Saturn is therefore in the exaltation of Venus. So just because something on the surface seems difficult doesn't mean it's a problem. And if you're able to be constructive, if you're able to look at the possibility of creating structure, then you may be able to turn things round, and you can perhaps take something which in itself may appear to be going nowhere. It just may seem very vague, and you never really got the discipline to sort it out. And you might be able to take it and, with the help of Saturn, turn it into something that is real. And it's hard work. And it's not just that we've got Venus conjunct Saturn. We've also got Moon opposition Saturn. So Moon opposition Saturn might be about something that is really important to you, and you're starting to realize, hold on, this isn't working, Moon opposition Saturn. Then you have to ask what you're going to do now. Now, in a way, the easiest option is to just give up on it. You reach the first hurdle, you say, well, this is too difficult. But if you go through with it, if you go through with the difficulty, if you go through with the effort, that Moon opposition Saturn, and you keep going, then I think that you're going to be rewarded. So in a way, Taurus, it's a kind of day that if you are lazy and you don't want to put in the work, it could well be a miserable day. That is possible. On the other hand, if you are really tough, hardworking and persistent, being tough, hardworking and persistent, these can be Taurian traits. So if you follow that line and you just keep going, then in the end, I actually think that Saturn will start working for you. So Saturn is not easy. Saturn might be like some really difficult piece of technology that requires maybe expert handling, and you've got to read the instructions and you've got to really work on it. But if you can do all of that, then I'm actually quite confident that in the end, Saturn is really going to work in your favor. I'm not saying it will work in your favor, but it could work in your favor. Just don't get put off by the negativity. that is really important. So you could say that today is something of a challenge, and looking further afield, the sun now is getting really close to the end of Capricorn. And, okay, it's nice having the sun in late Capricorn. It's a sun in Capricorn, it's an earth sign. But the sun moving into Aquarius, as it does over the weekend, I think is it Sunday? I think the 19th. The sun moves into Capricorn. Sorry, the sun moves into Aquarius. That is going to be something, I think, really good for you. I think that is really going to allow you to concentrate on being successful, making things happen, and actually perhaps using that Venus conjunct Saturn in a really constructive way. But in my next video, when I look at the weekend, I'll be looking in detail about what it means for the sun in Aquarius, and specifically what it means for Taurians for the sun to be moving into Aquarius. Gemini, we have quite a lot of action in Virgo and Pisces. And we've got the moon going through Pisces, and we have a conjunction between the Venus and, sorry, I got that wrong, didn't I? Moon going through Virgo. We've got the moon going through Virgo, and we've got a Venus-Saturn conjunction in Pisces. So a lot of action there in those two signs. And in a way, they almost sort of contradict each other. With the moon moving through Virgo, there may be a feeling that you have to really stay in place. You don't really want to go anywhere. I mean, not in a dramatic and time-consuming way, and you prefer to have things around you which you know and understand, and you might try to be adventurous, but is it really going to work? And Gemini is an air sign, and Geminis often appreciate that sort of extra spark from elsewhere, something to get you going, something to catch your interest. And today, that spark might be missing. I mean, you can try your hardest to make things move. I mean, the moon does make a square to Jupiter. So moon square Jupiter, you have Jupiter in Gemini, is about you trying to be enthusiastic, trying to make things happen. But the question is it really going to work? So you might again feel, well, what is the point? Yet there is this conjunction between Venus and Saturn, and this Venus-Saturn conjunction, it's exact over the weekend. It's not exact today, but it's pretty close. And the Venus-Saturn conjunction, in one sense, is a difficult influence. It makes you think that things are difficult, things are heavy. Achieving your ambitions is going to be perhaps such hard work, but really there's no point in trying. But need it be like that? The Venus-Saturn conjunction is a contact which is quite disciplined, and it allows you to think about the impression you are making. With Venus moving through Pisces, it's a time where Geminis are aware of the impact they're having on other people, and with Venus conjunct Saturn, there could be moments of awareness where you see that you might be having a negative impact, and you could be a bit self-conscious. But on the other hand, if you're able to go through with it and to work on it, in spite of your reservations, then you actually could be rewarded. And a serious a serious approach in public, in a public environment where people are noticing what you're doing, could actually be quite effective. And it's not that you have to do anything spectacular. It's not really a day for anyone to do anything spectacular at the moment. But you don't have to do anything spectacular. You just have to be serious. You just have to be yourself. And in that way, I do actually think that you will end up being appreciated. And additionally, it may be a time when you need as much information as possible, because you are in an information processing mood, and you can get a lot of information if you're in your own space doing your own thing, but sometimes you have to move out and interact and pick up on what's being generated. I think it's kind of like with psychics. There is a lot of online psychics, and psychics will interact with people over the internet, and that's been a feature for some time. And the theory would be that having a face-to-face meeting with a psychic, they could be thousands of miles apart, but it would work. But there is something, I believe, that some psychics feel that it doesn't actually work when it's online. That there's something about face-to-face contact that is really important. There are cues they just don't get on Zoom or on Skype, as people used to interact. And it may be a bit like this for you. I mean, I'm not saying you're a psychic or anything. I mean, we're all psychic, I suppose, at some level. But Gemini, you may need face-to-face contact in order to really understand what's going on, to be able to get the full picture. And just being alone in your own cellar or in your own basement, you might miss things out. So in that sense, Gemini, there is a little bit of a challenge. If you really want to understand something, you need that direct physical contact, I think. And it may be about a psychic process, picking up cues, picking up information from people, and you get it and you can process it, and then at a later stage you can actually start to use that information. And we could say astrologically that there is a T-square today. I talked about Moon square Jupiter, I've talked about Moon opposition Saturn, but in fact Jupiter is square Saturn, and the Moon is bringing it all together. So we could say that there's Moon opposition Saturn, which, as I've said, is quite a difficult influence, and Jupiter is on the T, and with Jupiter on the T, that's the way forward. That is the way to unlock the T-square. And for a Gemini, with Jupiter in your sign, you maybe have to look at the negativity flying around you. And that negativity is not just about you. It's also about other people and the whole environment in which we're living. And Jupiter can somehow unlock it. Jupiter can see the possibility. And there is this underlying optimism which will not get beaten down. And Jupiter just understands. And Jupiter has already hit peak weakness. Jupiter's not in a great position, but it's getting stronger now because Jupiter is in its own terms. And you suddenly start to see a possibility. You go through the negativity, you see all the ways in which things are wrong, all the ways in which things are not working, your contacts with other people, perhaps your direct contacts with other people are giving you an emotional and even a psychic picture, and you're picking it all up. There may be a moment where you just feel a little bit overwhelmed by it, but then you can see the path forward, and you don't have to follow that path right now, but that path is becoming open, and that Jupiter in Gemini realizes this. And Jupiter's just going to get stronger. In a couple of weeks' time, Jupiter will be direct. And so Gemini, in spite of everything, you can see the way things are going to unfold, and unfold in a way that is going to be good for you and your interests. Cancer. Cancer, it might be a little difficult to explain yourself. You've maybe got things that you want to explain, but is it actually going to be possible? You might find that certain people just don't want to listen. You try your hardest, you point things out, you're in the right, but nothing happens. People don't want to hear. And that is connected with the fact that the moon is opposition Saturn. It's a difficult aspect, this moon-Saturn opposition. And Saturn may represent a person or a situation that just doesn't understand you, doesn't want to understand you. And so making headway could be very difficult. So don't try too hard to explain yourself. Say it once. If it doesn't make sense, that's just the way it is, and maybe you just need to choose a different time, a different moment. Alternatively, you could take a different approach and utilize the fact that the main configuration astrologically today is a T-square. And what we have today is we have an opposition between Moon and Saturn, as I've just described, and Jupiter is on the T. So Jupiter is square Saturn, and the Moon is square Jupiter. And Jupiter represents a solution to a problem. And Jupiter as a planet actually has a certain sympathy with your sign, because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. Although, of course, Jupiter is in Gemini. It's not a sign where Jupiter is very strong. But Jupiter is encouraging you to look at things from a fairly secretive perspective, not telling people what you're doing, not responding directly. But with Moon opposition Saturn, you come across a block. There's a hurdle. It may even be a situation where you and another person just have nothing to do with one another. You can't relate. Yet Jupiter is a different approach. You get your way in the end. You get through to people, but using an approach which is really quite unconventional and is not advertised. And Jupiter has been moving in Gemini since, I think, May of last year. And this Jupiter in Gemini at times has been encouraging you to work behind the scenes. You don't have to be noticed. And so this Jupiter in Gemini is making itself prominent through this Moon square Jupiter, Jupiter square Saturn. And if you find that things aren't working, you find that people are uncooperative, not just people, it may be organizations. You just have to do things your way, and you may have to be quite secretive about it. That doesn't mean being devious, but it just could be a case where the less you advertise your intentions, the better. And you're still there. You're still very present. The moon is in Virgo. You're noticing things. And most importantly, Cancer, you're noticing the things that are important. And, it's tempting to tell people about what you notice, but I don't think they're necessarily going to understand, or they're not going to want to understand. But the key thing is that you're becoming wiser and you're becoming more informed. And at a certain stage, you will know what to do. And whatever you decide, it will be a very sort of individual course of action. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, relationships is always something that people want to know about, or at least some people want to know about. And this moon opposition Saturn is not great for relationships, because the moon is your ruler and it's opposition Saturn, which is ruler of Capricorn. So moon opposition Saturn, it may be that you just have to accept that you and another person do not see eye to eye. Now, you could then sort of criticize what I've just said by saying, well, don't I say the same thing every month? I mean, there is a moon-Saturn opposition every single month. And so, yeah, I could say the same thing every single month. But what might make it more poignant is not just the fact that we've got this moon opposition Saturn, it's the fact that Venus is conjunct Saturn as well. And so Venus conjunct Saturn can be about relationship difficulties, or a sense that it's just difficult to express what one feels. So when you throw in moon opposition Saturn and Venus conjunct Saturn, this just might be a time when Cancerians have to be very careful in terms of one-to-one relationships and not take things to heart. Moon opposition Saturn is a very fast aspect. And indeed, Venus conjunct Saturn, it's exact this weekend, but it does move on. So if you feel over the next few days that relationships are disappointing, then this is not a long-term situation. And it may be quite useful, because it's a time when you can actually see people for what they really are. And if you see the bad sides of someone's personality, you should be happy. I mean, knowledge is good. Knowledge is always good, isn't it? Unless you subscribe to the fact that ignorance is bliss. But I don't think ignorance is bliss. It's good to know, I would have said. And the more informed you can be, the better. Leo, I have described today, I've been through 4 of the signs, and you're the 5th, and I've had a general introduction to the astrology of today, and I've been somewhat negative. I've focused on the fact that the moon is opposition Saturn, Venus is conjunct Saturn, and it might not be anything you want to hear, and maybe not anything that anyone wants to hear. But if anyone can be positive, then maybe it's you. There's something about you that is not going to be beaten down. You can see possibilities that other people can't see. And there's just something about you which is just enthusiastic. There doesn't seem to be any logical reason for your enthusiasm, but you just feel that things actually are okay. And in terms of your small part of the world, Leo, in your own way, you can change it. And by making a deliberate attempt to be, by making a deliberate attempt to be sort of positive and upbeat. You can make an impact. It's not that you can completely change people's minds. You can completely encourage them to, you completely turn them into happy, carefree individuals. You can't quite do that, but you are offering a new possibility. And it's just not just a new possibility for yourself, but it's also a new possibility for them. And it would help if you make a special effort not to focus on the things that people are worried about. There is a Moon opposition Saturn today, and Moon opposition Saturn, it might relate to money, feeling that there's maybe not enough money, that a lack of money is undermining one's happiness. Maybe it's undermining your happiness, maybe it's undermining someone else's happiness, and just a general uneasiness. And there is that. But your job is to steer clear of those trouble spots. Now, normally I would have said, no, one shouldn't take that approach. I try to advocate realism. If there's a problem, you should confront it. If something financially is not as it should be, then sort it out. But today may be different. It might be that you should be aware that in the end there are some things that need to be dealt with, but maybe they don't have to be dealt with today. And if you can keep everyone positive, and if you can keep yourself positive, even if it feels hard work, having to pump out the positive propaganda, and in a way it kind of is propaganda, because there are things going on that need to be worried about, but just making that special effort, you can at the very least keep things going. And it's also possible that you can create something out of nothing. That you start by being positive about something and it seems to be unrealistic, but you keep going, and that might create a change, and that might create another change, and in the end, through positive thinking, you might be able to create a positive situation for everyone. And again, I'm not a fan of positive thinking. As far as I'm concerned, very often negative thinking is the way forward. If you think that everything is hopeless, then sometimes you find that you transform the situation, because you've created a space for something good to happen. But I won't go into details about my messed up logic there. But it is a situation where I think, Leo, positive thinking can work, and in terms of relationships, it just may be a time where you have to persevere, and don't be put off by other people's reaction to you. It may seem a little bit negative, but you just keep going, and you can change things, and change is certainly in the air. The sun is at 2750 Capricorn, just a couple more degrees before the sun changes sign. And then over the weekend, I think on the 19th, the sun moves into Aquarius, and that is an important sign change. Aquarius is your opposite sign. That is going to have an effect on you. And when I do my forecast for the weekend, which I think will be my next video, I'll consider how that sun in Aquarius might affect you. Virgo, you're quite sensitive to what's happening at the moment. The moon is moving through your sign, and so there is a sense of awareness, and it's always good to be aware. You're aware of the possibilities, and you're aware of also, what can hold you back, what the problems are. And it is potentially quite a difficult day for everyone. We do have Moon opposition Saturn, Moon moving through Virgo, making that opposition to Saturn. We also have, in your opposite sign, Pisces, we have Venus conjunct Saturn. And that Venus conjunct Saturn is exact over the weekend, but the Moon is picking up on it, because the Moon makes an opposition to Venus, then it makes straight away an opposition to Saturn. And that does affect you directly. And Virgo, that means that really you can't ignore other people and their dramas. And, they might have dramas, they might have things going on that they're not happy about. And in a way, it's good if there's a bit of drama, because at least you can see what's going on. What would be more difficult if there's no drama at all, if things are being kept secret. People are unhappy, but they're not talking about why they're unhappy. But you notice everything with the Moon in Virgo. You're sensitive to the environment. You're sensitive to what the environment contains, and the environment can contain, I suppose, vibes. That's possible. Getting into the vibes and feeling those vibes, and some of those vibes are good, some of them are bad, and that does have an effect on you. There's also the composition of the environment, even in a sort of a chemical sense. Virgoans are very aware of that, and so make the most of your sensitivity, and just don't be overwhelmed by it, and don't be surprised by other people's behavior, because people are under pressure and they're doing things which may not be entirely characteristic of them, and part of that might be their own sense of negativity. Venus is conjunct Saturn. That can't be avoided. And Venus conjunct Saturn, it's a sense that maybe some people feel sorry for themselves, or they're holding something back. And with that Moon opposition Saturn, you're very aware of what they're holding back. And while there is a lot of information coming your way, Virgo, it's important that you don't jump to conclusions. You haven't got the whole picture, and it may be a couple of days before you really understand everything that's happening, and you have to distinguish between information which is directly relevant and information which is not so important, but you could make it important, and there could be a sense of exaggeration. So there's certainly a lot to work on today, and I don't think that relationships can be entirely avoided, and some relationships may be disappointing. And the main astrological configuration today is actually, there is a T-square. We've got the Moon is opposition Saturn, and Jupiter is opposition Saturn. So that Jupiter-Saturn square, sorry, not opposition, Jupiter is square Saturn. So Jupiter was square Saturn, I think, on Christmas Eve. But Jupiter and Saturn, they're moving slowly. This square is still in operation. And so the Moon is picking up on Jupiter and Saturn. So what we have is, we've got Moon opposition Saturn with Jupiter on the T. So Jupiter perhaps represents a solution, and it means that you should not get obsessed about other people and their problems, and you shouldn't reach a stage where someone's problem becomes your problem, perhaps because someone's projecting their garbage onto you. I mean, that's not something you want. But Jupiter provides an alternative, not just an alternative, but it provides an answer. And you don't want to get too tangled up in the interpersonal mess. You need to look at things from a different view. And what you need to do with that Jupiter is to just simply ask yourself, what do you want? In terms of the current situation, what actually are your aims? What would you like to achieve? And is the current situation, however difficult it might be, is it helpful? Now that might seem obvious to say, but if other people are feeling sorry for themselves, how can that possibly be helpful? Well, if you are doing anything of a career nature, you're trying to create something for yourself. It needn't be about your career. It can be about the whole way you want to progress with your life. And that's what the Jupiter is all about. Jupiter is in a very high profile part of your chart. If that's what you want to do, you are being informed. Other people's reactions, however negative, are giving you an opportunity. You're seeing the world for what it is, and you're also seeing what is possible. And sometimes by seeing another person's dissatisfaction, you can actually see a new possibility for yourself. And in a way, this might sound a bit strange, but the more discontent other people are, the better you should feel. Not as in happy, but as in feeling that something is possible. The more other people feel that there is no possibility, the more you feel that there actually is a possibility. And you can then, through your own ambitions, distinguish yourself from other people and not be caught up in it. And then by understanding what is possible and start moving towards what is possible, it can all feed back, and you can make other people's lives a lot better in the end. But whatever's happening, Virgo, don't get caught up in interpersonal details. Don't spend ages listening to another person's problem. Listen to another person's problem long enough to get an understanding of what's happening, and through that understanding, you might actually get some motivation in terms of what you want to do next, and where you want to focus your energy. So, I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of a somewhat complex picture, but I do feel that if you respond in the right way, and if you don't give anyone too much of your attention, and you're prepared to learn from every experience, it can be a day that, in the end, can start to work in your favour. Libra, I've been talking about Venus conjunct Saturn, and that Venus conjunct Saturn is getting really close. Over the weekend, Venus makes the exact conjunction, and what we have now is we have the Moon making an opposition to Venus, making an opposition to Saturn. So the Moon is really bringing that Venus conjunct Saturn together. And it's possible with this Venus conjunct Saturn that you might feel a little bit sorry for yourself. I mean, I have to say that because Venus is your ruler, and it's moving towards a conjunction of Saturn, and one doesn't associate Venus conjunct Saturn with loads and loads of happiness. It's not a particularly bountiful combination. Yet Saturn is in Pisces. Saturn is in a sign that where Venus is exalted. And of course, Venus is strong in Pisces. So it's quite possible that you can turn this conjunction round. And the way to turn this conjunction round is probably to work on yourself, and you need to make sure that everything is completely in order. This Venus conjunct Saturn may not tolerate mistakes, and if you leave things to chance, then what can you expect? You might be disappointed. But if you see this as if you see this conjunction between Venus and Saturn as an opportunity to ensure that everything is right, everything is correctly placed, that if something is not doing you any good, it is removed, and you just don't tolerate anything unhealthy. I mean, by unhealthy, I'm looking at health on every level. Psychological health, mental health, spiritual health. That Venus-Saturn conjunction allows you to make the distinction. And actually, I think you're helped by the moon in Virgo, opposition that Venus-Saturn. Moon in Virgo is about, it is about making distinctions. And you're able to tell yourself, well, this person is helpful, this person is not helpful, this action is working in your interest, this action is damaging your interests. You're looking at what you're eating, everything is either good or bad. It's either life-affirming or, I won't say life-denying, but it's undermining you. And if you can go through everything you're doing in a way that is systematic, and you're engaging what you can see on the surface and also what you can feel underneath. You can sort of feel whether things are good or bad. I think you really can with this Venus. Venus is in Pisces. Venus is your ruler. Venus is exalted in Pisces. So, this means that you don't have to be satisfied with the way things were. You don't have to be satisfied with something which wasn't good for you, which wasn't perfect for you. Things can be perfect for you. And one of the advantages of Venus conjunct Saturn is it is actually its negativity, because you're going to be quick to feel bad about something. And because you're quick to feel bad about something, quick to feel negative about it, that means you're quick to understand that something really isn't doing you any good. And that allows you to make the changes. And at first, I do think the emphasis is going to be more about throwing out the bad rather than introducing the good. So get rid of stuff that isn't working and create some space. And once you've done that, you can introduce new things to replace it. So it can be a process of growth, and I think you're going to feel, if you handle things right, if you're very proactive, that you're taking action to make yourself feel happier and healthier. But you have to be able to sort of move through the negativity and be fairly brutal about it. Perhaps more brutal than the average Libra would like to be. If something is not serving your interests, then get rid of it. And with Venus conjunct Saturn, that something might be a person, it might be a group of people. Be ruthless. It is a new year. It's a time for change, and I think that this is a change, Libra, that you really can bring about. Scorpio. Scorpio, you're feeling that you want to do something that is useful, and it's really important for you to do something useful, and you know that there are certain things that really only you can do, and that's the way it should be. Absolutely right. Especially now that the South Node has gone into Pisces, and you can listen to what other people are talking about, you can listen to other people's suggestions, but it doesn't feel great. You know in your heart of hearts that you're right and that other people just don't understand. So it's not really a time to be listening too hard to other people, though other people could be a problem. There is an opposition between the Moon and Saturn, and with this Moon-Saturn opposition, you might feel that there are just irritating influences, people suggesting you do one thing or another thing, and you don't really want to do it. You might feel you should do it, but it's very important that you hold firm, and whatever's happening today, it's going to be very important that it happens on your terms, and it's not a time to be compromising, and not everyone is going to be happy about this. It may be that some people are disappointed by your reaction. I've talked today a lot about other people being a problem, getting a negative response from other people. Other people are perhaps going through their own thing, and that those sort of other people that I've been talking about may actually be you. So the way you respond to others may not be particularly positive. It's not that you're trying your hardest to be negative, it's just the way you are, and it's the way you are right now, and ideally it's because you are really concentrated on your own priorities, and you need to be honest about it. I think you actually can be honest about it. Over the weekend, the Mercury is starting to Mercury makes a sextile to Saturn. This sextile between Mercury and Saturn is already in operation, and with Mercury sextile Saturn, Scorpio, you're able to tell people how you feel, and you're able to tell people how things are in a very no-nonsense kind of way. And the sooner you tell them, the better. Don't wait till the weekend. Explain the situation as well as you can. You don't have to reveal everything, but at least you'll be giving people an explanation. You don't want people to be guessing about who you are and what your motives are. That's not something you want. And also, this Sun opposition Mars that we had, was it yesterday or the day before? That Sun opposition Mars is still working. It's still there. And the Sun opposition Mars is an aspect that, as I've already told you, is very dynamic, and it is very much about you and what you want to do, and you're not going to take kindly to anyone trying to sort of get in your way or tell you what to do or give you needless criticism. You won't take kindly to this. And so understand who you are, and don't try to be a person you're not. Don't try to be conciliatory. Don't try to be too nice. Don't spend too much time listening to other people's complaints. It's unnecessary. You instead need to really think about who you are, and the clearer you are, I think the easier it's going to be.
And in the end, you may actually get a degree of sympathy and understanding. And what really causes a mess is when you're giving mixed signals. If you give clear signals, Scorpio, then I think that Friday should run relatively smoothly. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, there is a T-square today. I didn't really talk about this T-square when I was doing the introduction to the overall planetary situation, but there is this T-square. So we've got the Moon is opposition Saturn, and Jupiter, your ruler, is on the T. And so when you've got a T-square, you often have a problem, a conflict, and the planet on the T represents a solution to the conflict. So, with Moon opposition Saturn, that is a difficult aspect. Moon opposition Saturn represents potentially a deadlock situation, something that really isn't working. Moon in Virgo, opposition Saturn in Pisces. That could be about the conflict between what you would like to be doing, what you regard as being your comfort zone, being in your comfort zone, and the distractions from outside. And you're not going to take kindly to being told what to do. You just find it an irritation. And in fact, Sagittarius, you could be uncharacteristically stubborn, and that could create bad feeling. But Jupiter is an answer. Jupiter is, if you like, a solution to the conflict. And Jupiter's in Gemini, in your opposite sign, and with that Jupiter in Gemini, I think the challenge is to really, really try to understand what other people are trying to do. Make a special effort to look at things from their perspective and to try to understand their motives. And it might not be something you want to do. I think it probably isn't something you want to do. I think that you're going to see conflict. You're going to see another person as just an irritant. You won't necessarily see them as a whole human being. But Jupiter allows you to get a new understanding, to understand why someone is doing what they're doing. And with that new understanding, you have some sympathy, and you can show some sympathy, but you're not going to be showing so much sympathy that you're going to be undermining your own interests. Just a little bit of empathy and compassion, but at the same time looking after your own needs is going to be the way forward. And probably once you've understood other people and what their interests are, you'll have an understanding of how much you need to give. You have to give a little bit today. Not a lot, but enough. And it just may be symbolic. You give someone your time in a symbolic way. It doesn't have to be all your time, just a little bit of charity, let's call it charity, or a little bit of consideration is really going to make so much difference, and that will just allow you to really stabilize the situation. And it's not all about you, and consider the possibility that however irritating the world is, it isn't necessarily conspiring to do you down, to make things bad for you. It's not. There is actually an opportunity that you are being offered, and it just might be the case of, looking at looking a gift horse in the mouth. There may be a gift horse there, and you could just ignore. You could, if you're not careful, ignore a major opportunity that's being offered to you, but it's just being presented to you at first as something you're not interested in. It's not immediately obvious to you, but it is there. And when you actually start to listen to what people are saying, to what the world is saying to you, you may just see that opportunity, and there should be a chance to really take advantage of it. And once you see an opportunity, and I think there is an opportunity somewhere there, you are able to take action to actually really get hold of it. You can, because you do have a lot of power today. As I've said, I think yesterday, overall Sagittarius, it's a situation where you are slowly becoming more powerful, and almost like every day you're more powerful than the previous day. I mean, okay, there are going to be ups and downs, but it's a situation where you pass the low point. And so when you see something, give it everything you've got, and just don't underestimate yourself. And most importantly, don't underestimate other people. They may seem annoying, but actually I really do think that they've got something important to offer. Capricorn, it's not a bad day, which is great considering how a lot of other people are experiencing the day. I think for many people, I think that this Friday could be tough, and possibly, of all the 12 signs, you're probably having the best day, all things being equal. You have a lot of planets in Earth signs. You've got Sun, Mercury, Moon, Uranus, of course, South Node in Virgo. So it's not a day where things are unfamiliar. You understand how things come together, and I don't think you'll have any difficulty expressing yourself. Moon in Virgo is nice from a Capricorn perspective. It allows you to look at things on a new level, and you can see a perspective that perhaps you hadn't had recently. You can see that actually, amazingly, things are working out. And also that moon in Virgo is making a trine to Mercury, and of course Mercury is in your sign. So the Moon Mercury trine really does allow you to tell everyone what you think. You're going to be clear, you're going to be no nonsense, and you will be able to get your message across. So there's no danger, I think, of you being ignored or feeling that you're being ignored. And at the same time, what you do and what you say, it's going to carry a lot of weight. And of course, weight is a word that is maybe associated with Saturn. I mean, Saturn has as its ruling metal lead. Of course, lead is heavy, and there is something about you that is a bit heavy from an external perspective. I mean, you might not feel it like that, but you're serious, and Venus is making a conjunction to Saturn. Moon is making an opposition to Saturn. So that Venus conjunct Saturn, which is exact over the weekend, and Moon opposition Saturn is exact today, maybe exact tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but the Moon and Venus hitting Saturn does tell you maybe about how you are occurring, and you are occurring as a person who knows what they're doing, who can be trusted, but who also has authority, could be a somewhat overbearing authority at times, depends how you use it, but you have the capacity to put people in their place, to give good advice, and also to give tough advice at the same time. And so it's possible, I suppose, that you're taken too seriously. And so, Capricorn, it might be a good idea to moderate your message. You might want to tell people things as you see it, as it is, stick to the facts, but other people are sensitive. Venus in Pisces, moving towards that conjunction with Saturn, Venus in Pisces might represent someone who is sensitive, whose feelings are easily hurt. And so, Capricorn, it's just important that you're aware of how you occur to people, and that you use your strength in the right way, and that you're there to to be supportive. You don't want to sort of tear people down just for the sake of it. And while you're at it, you come over as a person who is clever, who is resourceful, who just, you have a lot of tricks up your sleeve. And it may be that in certain quarters you have been slightly underestimated, and now you show what you can do. And it is impressive. It could be overwhelmingly impressive. So you get the picture. It's a day when I think that you are in a strong position, and with that strength comes a certain amount of responsibility. And one aspect we've got today is we've got that Moon opposition Saturn, which I've already talked about, but Jupiter is on the T. So the Moon is making a square to Jupiter, and Jupiter's making a square to Saturn. And so with that T-square, we really have to look at what Jupiter is about. And in your case, Jupiter is asking you to work with things. It's not about absolute answers. So in terms of other people, it's tempting to say yes or no, to give one-word answers. I mean, that's kind of quite Capricorn, being economical with what you say. But one-word answers do have their problems. I mean, it can be quite off-putting, particularly if that one-word answer is a no. And Jupiter is asking you to be a little more flexible. And these one-word answers, it might not just be your answers to other people. It may actually be your answers to yourself. It may be that you are thinking about possibilities, you have your ideas, and at the same time you're being very realistic, and you might want to give yourself a one-word answer. It might even be no. But Jupiter is indicating that, it's more complicated than that, and there can always be a yes. But that yes comes with conditions, and Jupiter is
working out what is possible, what needs to be done in order to get from A to B. On the face of it, getting from A to B might be impossible. But Jupiter is able to look at an impossibility, or even a fantasy, and say, well, actually, it could be achieved if you were to do this, this, and this. And that might be what Jupiter is asking you to do, to be constructive. You know, you might, for example, tell someone, or indeed tell yourself, that something is not 100% impossible, but maybe there's only it's only 80% impossible. There is a chance it could be done, but if you wanted to do it, you would have to do this, this, and this. And that's Jupiter having the imagination to flesh out the details, to work out what would need to be done. And so, Capricorn, that might be the big challenge. The big challenge today is to be imaginative, but also very, very practical. And to be practically imaginative in terms of taking something that on the surface is impossible, but creating a possibility. Not a certainty, but a possibility. Aquarius. Aquarius, Venus is making a conjunction to Saturn. I've been talking about this for some time. This Venus-Saturn conjunction is exact over the weekend. Venus and Saturn are now about a degree apart. And this Venus-Saturn conjunction can be looked at in a number of ways. Venus could represent a person, and Saturn can represent you, and therefore Venus-Saturn conjunction might represent a relationship. And in terms of astrology and relationships, probably some astrologers are going to be really positive about it. And why not? Why not be positive about a conjunction between Venus and Saturn? Venus may indicate a new relationship, someone new coming into your life, whether they're coming into your life for a short period of time or a long period of time, it doesn't matter. I think that you should be open to new possibilities, and that relationship can have many purposes, can have many functions, and so do consider the possibility that another person can make your life better, and in different ways. It might be that they can make your life better for 5 minutes, or it could be that they can make your life better for the next 20 years. So do consider what other people can offer, and don't be too harsh, because Saturn can be a harsh planet, and so with Venus moving towards a conjunction of Saturn, there might be something about you that is off-putting, deliberately off-putting. You try to tell someone to back off, but before telling anyone to back off, whoever they are, I think that you should make some effort to ascertain who they are, what they want, and what they can offer. So be as open-minded as possible, and don't allow your own private feelings and fears and contemplations to mess things up. So that's one way in which the Venus-Saturn conjunction could be working. As I think I've already mentioned, Venus conjunct Saturn could have a financial element, and this Venus-Saturn conjunction is getting stronger, and I would have said that it might be a financial opportunity. Venus is the planet of money, and it's in Pisces, it's exalted in Pisces, it's coming your way. So over the next couple of days, something financial could show up, and I think by and large it's going to be something good, something that you really can take advantage of. And in this light, Aquarius,
do consider everything that you are, everything you can do. Don't underestimate yourself. There may be dormant skills which you just haven't been using that could really work in your favor. You could maybe make money out of them. They could be profitable in some way. And if you actually spend the time vigorously being clever, with real energy, you find something that you're good at, that you're passionate about, and you give it everything you've got, then actually something quite amazing might happen. You might actually realize that you've got something really special. And so consider everything you are, and don't be modest. That really is important. Don't be modest. And you might find that if you're not modest, you can use something you'd perhaps given up on long ago. You can use it, you can put it into action, you can gain satisfaction from it, and who knows, you may be able to actually profit from it. So that's something really worth considering. And action is happening on several levels. I mean, part of you does want to hold back. It's that Venus conjunct Saturn, but I don't think you should. I think that you've got to give everyone a chance. That's one thing going on, but your brain is really churning away at the moment. It's very active, and you're not really revealing what you're thinking about. There is a trine between the Moon and Mercury today, and that Moon trine Mercury is fortunate, but it's not about you just talking and talking. That's not how it's working. You feel that a lot of your thoughts just have to be kept to yourself, and you're able to understand things quickly, and you're developing an impression of the way things are. And it just could be preparatory, because over the weekend, the big change is Sun moving into Aquarius, and the Sun making a conjunction to Pluto. And with the Sun moving into Aquarius, things really are going to change, and you feel that you're on the cusp of some kind of change. And so when you're on the cusp of some kind of change, you're trying to work things through. There's new information coming your way, but you just feel that now is not quite the right time to reveal it all. And so Aquarius, if you think about it, there may be a sense of excitement that things are about to get better, that there's improvement on the way, and it is the Aquarian season. The Aquarian season is about to open up, so Aquarius, you need to get ready for it. Pisces, your sign, Pisces, is quite busy at the moment. There is this Venus conjunct Saturn in Pisces. It's going to be exact in a day or two's time, and at the same time, the Moon is making an opposition aspect to those planets in Pisces. The Moon is making an opposition to Venus. It's making an opposition to Saturn. Then in a day or two's time, the Moon will make an opposition to Neptune. And this interaction between the Moon and Virgo and the Pisces planets could be about other people and how you relate to the world around you. You do at some level seem very clear about who you are and what you want, and you perhaps don't feel that you necessarily need to worry about what other people are doing and other people's needs, but it might still intrude because of that that lunar aspect, especially the moon aspecting, both Venus and Saturn, and it could be an aspect that's optional. In other words, you could notice other people if you wanted to, but you don't have to. If you want to do things your way, yeah, just go ahead. But if you want to be compassionate, and if you want to show that you care, then give people something. They have got something to say, and there are things you perhaps need to listen to. I mean, maybe that moon opposition Saturn might represent someone who needs some help. I mean, maybe the Venus conjunct Saturn might represent someone in need of help. And so if you can be of assistance, it's not going to cost you much, but you can make a difference to someone's life. Maybe there's something they need advice with, help with, maybe they just need reassurance. That is something you can do. And that moon in Virgo is making a trine to Mercury. And so moon trine Mercury is a very communicative aspect. It's not a crazy communicative aspect because moon is in Virgo, Mercury is in Capricorn. Those two signs are quite understated. It's not about people talking their heads off. It's rather people have some serious things to say, and if you're prepared to listen to them, I don't think it would do any harm. And we can take things further, because today there is actually a T-square, and with a T-square you've got an opposition. You've got two planets in opposition, and then you've got another planet that's making a square to those two planets in opposition. So you've got moon opposition Saturn, and then you've got Jupiter on the T. So Jupiter's made that square of Saturn at the end of December, but the moon is making a square to Jupiter, and Jupiter represents you because Jupiter rules Pisces, and Jupiter also represents a resolution. And so you could say that the opposition between the moon and Saturn, or indeed between the moon opposition Venus as well, but with the moon's opposition to the Venus-Saturn conjunction, represents the problem, and Jupiter is the solution. And so there may be something that needs to be worked out with other people. It could just be someone's got a problem and needs your help. It could be about a relationship that could be going better, and right now things are not as good as they should be, and Jupiter is the answer, and Jupiter in Gemini allows you to create a sense of grounding and perspective. And it may be that other people are flying high but not happy flying high. They are just in the clouds, not knowing where they're going, worrying about everything. Everything seems to be a real mess, and there's no sense of stability there. And Jupiter can actually represent that stability, and Jupiter's stability is first of all about presenting an optimistic possibility. I mean, Jupiter is an optimistic planet, and Jupiter is improving. Jupiter is in its own terms. So Jupiter is not peregrine. Jupiter has dignity. You have dignity by definition, because Jupiter is in its own terms. And so Pisces, you can offer a possibility, but you can also offer security and stability. And it just may be about the way you present yourself, the way you use your words. And that means with this T-square Pisces that in fact today you can be a force for good. Now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 39, obstruction. And this is the only hexagram I got. It's blocked, or locked. There are no moving lines here. And I would have said that this hexagram is picking up on the fact that there is a Moon-Saturn conjunction. I mean, Moon-Saturn conjunction can be about obstruction. Moon in Virgo, opposition Saturn in Pisces, nothing moves. Nothing moves. Saturn brings things to a halt. And because there are no moving lines, well, we can say two things about that. No moving lines may indicate that this I Ching reading is not particularly significant. There's no movement. It's not perhaps going anywhere. I sometimes regard no moving lines as being similar to when you ask a horary chart when the moon is void of course. Things are just maybe not going anywhere here. But for better or for worse, when you ask a question of a moon void of course, it depends on the question. If you ask the question whether you've got some horrible illness and the moon is void of course, the answer is no. When you ask the question, will I make loads of money? The answer is also no. So moon void of course, if you're asking a question out of fear, very often the moon void of course it can actually be quite reassuring. And so it's the same perhaps with no moving lines here, that it's just not happening. But obstruction does indicate things are not happening, and so it might represent a situation where you're trying to make progress and you're stuck. And so when you're stuck, what do you do? Well, you've got two choices. Well, I suppose you've got three choices. You could continue moving forward, but if you continue moving forward, you're going to get nowhere. It's just going to get worse. Or you could stay where you are. You stay where you are and you wait. You wait for the situation to improve, or you wait for help. What you could also do is you could retreat. And there's certainly no dishonor in retreating with this hexagram obstruction. It is an appropriate thing to do because things are not moving. So if you feel that you're stuck, don't expect things to resolve immediately. You work out what you're going to do. Do you think you can move forward if you were to wait for help, or do you think you just need to start again? So there is a bit of a decision to make there. Now, when I have a hexagram that is locked, I do like to look at the nuclear hexagram to give us some added information. The nuclear hexagram being the hexagram when you knock off the top and bottom lines, when you're left with four central lines, and the top three of those four lines is the top trigram, and the bottom three of those four lines is the bottom trigram. And so the nuclear hexagram is hexagram 64, which is before completion. And so this hexagram gives us some background perhaps to the problem. And the background seems to be that, overall, we're trying to make a transition. That is what it's about. It's before completion, you get the idea of trying to cross a river, and it's a very wide river. I don't know, if you're in China, maybe you're trying to cross a yellow river or whatever it is, the Yangtze. I'm not very good on Chinese geography. And so you're stuck, or you're potentially stuck. You're running into a bit of trouble trying to complete the task. You haven't reached the far bank. And so the obstruction means you're you're trying to move from one place to another, but you haven't got there yet. Maybe it's part of a wider process. You're trying to create a transition from one situation to another, and it's more tactical. Like there's one little thing that you thought you were going to sort out today, you're trying, and it's just not working out. And so that's what it's about. But it's not a major defeat. It's not even a defeat at all. You've perhaps gone a little bit too far. You've understood the situation. Now you're going to retreat, gather your strength, and then at a later date, could be tomorrow. Remember, this reading only covers today, Friday. Could be tomorrow. You can have another go at it. So, don't be despondent. Okay, it's not great. This I Ching reading, 39 obstruction, but it's locked. I wouldn't necessarily read too much into it. And now I want to look at Meghan again. Again, my apologies for looking at Meghan again, but I do find her chart fascinating, really fascinating. And in particular, I was looking at this fire and how she visited this fire, and she got a lot of criticism for it. And of course, there are some people on YouTube who absolutely love criticizing Meghan. They almost do it professionally, and so it's something very obvious to criticize her for. But from my perspective, there is still this mystery, isn't it? Why would she go and do that? I mean, she does things that I don't fully understand, that don't make logical sense, but strike me as being self-defeating. And so, I did want to just have another look at her chart. And I mean, I have looked at her chart on numerous occasions, but I think that, with this channel, it just gives me an opportunity to look at one chart and really just try to get super familiar with one chart. For example, I looked at Donald Trump's chart and Kamala Harris's chart and Joe Biden's chart. I think it's just good. It's good practice to look at one person's chart. This is not just about Meghan. It's about astrology, and perhaps applying astrology to different people, different situations. And if you're dealing with ordinary people, maybe there's something useful here that you might be able to use. So here is Meghan's chart, and yes, I've looked at it in great detail. And what is the important point about Meghan's chart? And there is with Meghan something incredibly collective about her chart, and what perhaps matters with her chart is the fact that she was born on a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And you can't avoid that. And I think when you're looking at any chart, you should look at the outer planets, as, where someone is in terms of the collective. And this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is pretty close. And when she was born, she was influenced by whatever was happening around her. What were people excited about when she was born? And that's the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So one thing that people might have been excited about when she was born was the wedding of Charles and Diana. So Charles and Diana were married on July the 29th, 1981. In other words, they were married a week before Meghan was born. And so, in a way, you could imagine there's Meghan about to be born in that week. She's just on the way, and you have to think, what's the environment? And it's for her, she seems to have somehow picked up on this event, and it's a very high-profile event. And this is Jupiter-Saturn, and this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is not just about the royal wedding. I think that this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is in Libra, and to an extent, it is about celebrity, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and making use of one's celebrity status. One thinks of some of the people who are born on a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Kim Kardashian, Paris Hilton. Those people, they became adults at the time of reality TV. Sort of, I don't know, certainly I think in the UK, sort of Big Brother burst onto the scene around 2000. When Meghan would have been sort of 19 or whatever, when these people suddenly came into the public eye. And so that's what she was born into. And I do think that for her, it was for her, from a generational perspective, getting publicity, being famous, not necessarily being famous for anything, was very much important for her, and for just the general vibe in which she was born. And some people were better at becoming famous than others. I mean, Paris Hilton and particularly Kim Kardashian were particularly good at it, and they used whatever advantages they were born with, to make the most of it. So that's one aspect of it. And this Jupiter-Saturn in Meghan's chart is so personal because it's linked with the moon. I mean, she has moon conjunct Jupiter, conjunct Saturn, and when you're looking at a female chart, the moon, in a way, should be the woman. Okay, I think in a way that I take the view that in terms of the sun and the moon, that in female charts, very often it starts with the sun. So as a woman, as in childhood, a girl lives through her sun, and as she gets older, as she hits adulthood, she starts to identify more with the moon. I mean, that's the way it should be, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that is the sort of natural progression. And her moon, which she should be really developing into, is just it's such a difficult position, yet such a great position at the same time. I mean, she has got moon conjunct Jupiter. Moon conjunct Jupiter is an absolutely great aspect. It really is. And moon conjunct Jupiter, with people with this conjunction, they really can be successful, and they can be lucky. They can be very lucky, moon conjunct Jupiter. But her moon-Jupiter conjunction is kind of spoilt by Saturn. And so she's got Saturn on the moon-Jupiter midpoint. So you could say that moon-Jupiter conjunction represents her luck, and Saturn is... It doesn't take away from that luck, but it's trying to structure it. And I think the concept of structure and overstructure is possibly quite an important thing with Meghan. There is a sense in which she's trying too hard, and Saturn is trying to create a sense that she is in control, and that might be how Saturn is actually working in this case. I mean, it is a very strong Saturn, and there's no doubt she's been very successful. I mean, she was born, in a sense, with a certain degree of privilege. She had a father who was involved in the film industry, so she was born in the right place. She was born in California. It would have all looked good, and so Saturn really wants to be in control, but perhaps she's trying too hard to be in control, and I think that she's trying to. She is trying too hard, but one wonders also, with that moon being conjunct with Jupiter-Saturn, she has, perhaps unfortunate, she's become a collective entity. I mean,
the volume of YouTube videos on Meghan is quite amazing, and I suppose this has really started since she got married, and of course she got married just before the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the 2020 Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, I mean, she was born on a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and Jupiter-Saturn conjunction has kind of propelled her, but she's become a representative of the collective, and that's unfortunate. And it's almost like she has some kind of collective role that goes beyond her individuality. And there must be so many people with YouTube videos who are, and I suppose me included, who are getting extra views because she exists. And I'm not being entirely flippant, I mean, I have a small channel. I mean, it's not. I haven't got many subscribers, but still, I do know that if I talk about Meghan, I'll get more people to watch the video. And I mean, maybe not quite so much now, but maybe a year ago when I had 1,000 subscribers or less, and I put a picture of Meghan on my thumbnail, that was a sure way of getting a few extra people to watch. And I'm absolutely not alone. There's almost a whole YouTube industry around Meghan videos. People just have one Meghan video after another. And I do think that might be the fact that she has got Moon conjunct with Jupiter-Saturn, that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and the collective element of that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction has made things so personal. Now, what I find interesting about this chart, and what I do think is the most important aspect in her chart, probably, is that Mars square the midheaven. And in terms of her chart, she doesn't have a lot of planets in water signs. Except she does have Mars. I mean, she hasn't got a void in water. I mean, I'm quite into elemental voids. She's certainly got a planet in water, and that is her Mars. And so, where is the water? What is Mars? Well, I think that Mars is largely projected. She can come over or try to give the appearance of being an emotional person visiting the fire scene of a fire, appearing to be compassionate. Going to Uvalde, the scene of the shooting, very soon after the shooting. I think it was in May 2022, something like that. It seemed a little bit too soon after the shooting. I guess, why was she there? But anyway, this Mars in Cancer, I think it is projected, and it is a male planet. And I was thinking about her father, and I thought, well, I'll look at his chart, and I made a guess. I made a guess about what her father's sun sign was, because I don't think I'd looked at his chart before. So I made a guess. And my guess on her father, Thomas Markle's sign, I guessed that his sun was in Cancer, simply on the basis of the fact that Meghan has got her Mars in Cancer. And sure enough, Thomas Markle is a Cancer, born on July the 18th, 1944. I don't know his time of birth. And so he has interestingly, a Moon-Saturn conjunction in Cancer, and obviously he's born close to a new moon in Cancer. So he is a man who is actually very Cancerian, and so he represents, the Cancer principle. And again, that Mars in Meghan's chart potentially represents something projected, something she regards perhaps as being overly emotional, maybe. And if you do a comparison of Meghan's chart and her
father's chart, there are certainly some interesting things to note. So there's Meghan's Mars, and you can see that the Moon-Saturn conjunction is pretty close to her Mars, and also the Sun is his Sun is right on her ascendant, so she can't avoid that Cancer. But why does she not want to have anything to do with him? It's almost like she doesn't really want to have to do anything to do with his Cancer planets. Now, her mother has Venus in Cancer, and she seems to have a good relationship with her mother. So, and her Venus, I think the mother's Venus is at around 24 Cancer. So the mother's on the Venus, mother's Venus is on her ascendant, I think. So yeah, that's good. But something to do with the male principle seems to be an issue here. Maybe emotional men. I don't know. Her husband, prior to Harry, was Trevor Engelson, and I think he was a Scorpio. So that's interesting. I think he had the Sun and the Moon in Scorpio, or may have done. There's probably her husband was probably a Scorpio. I only have a noon chart for him, but he probably had. If he was born right at the beginning of the day, I suppose the Sun and the Moon might have been in Libra, but almost certainly her husband was her first husband was a Scorpio. But turning back to Thomas Markle. Now Thomas Markle additionally had a Black Moon Lilith Chiron conjunction, and that Black Moon Lilith Chiron conjunction was at 13 Virgo. And that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because Meghan has got her Venus at 13 Virgo. So when Meghan was born, one of the transits that Thomas Markle had was Venus. Venus represents the birth of a girl, I suppose, hitting his Chiron Black Moon Lilith conjunction. So in some way, she might have personified his Lilith his Black Moon Lilith Chiron conjunction. So that's something to think about. Now, going back to Meghan's chart and that Mars. Now that Mars, I think it also links with Harry, and I've said this before. I know that Harry's not a Cancer; he's a Virgo, but again, Harry is a man who is very emotional. He's a man who wears his heart on his sleeve, and I suppose Mars is also Mars represents someone who perhaps has a connection with the military, and a man who is emotional, who gets angry, who's quite brooding, and this is kind of a man she's not going to be, in the end, I don't know, how much is she going to be able to deal with it? Because I think she might have a problem with excessive emotion, particularly coming from men. I think that is a possibility. She might find it a bit overwhelming, particularly if you take the view that Mars is a male planet. It is projected, and aside from that Mars, she doesn't really have much water in her chart. And Mars can be seen in a different way. Mars is square her midheaven. The midheaven is the angle that matters. We think a lot about the ascendant. It's always the ascendant this, ascendant that. But what about the poor midheaven? The midheaven always has to play second fiddle to the ascendant. And this chart is a reminder that we need to look at the midheaven. Now, there is a house system called the Meridian house system, which focuses on the midheaven rather than the ascendant. And in terms of that Mars,
I think it would be interesting to look at Meghan's chart from a meridian perspective. So from a meridian perspective, where you make where everything is, all the houses flow from a meridian, and here's the meridian house system. And so if you use the meridian house system, you can see that that Meghan has Mars rising, or at least Mars on the first house cusp, and there is something very defensive about that. And when you've got Mars on the first house cusp, the meridian, this is a house system which talks about her development forward, and how she wants to project herself. And so with Mars on the first house cusp, she wants to really push things. She is quite aggressive about getting her way. And so going back to her regular chart, just a reminder that Mars really is important. And so Mars on the midheaven is Mars square the midheaven. It's also sesquiquadrate Uranus. So Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus, it's quite a close sesquiquadrate between Uranus. It's again, it sort of assumes a conflict. It is quite confrontational, and it is very, very focused. So focused that it might be a little bit brittle. It is very fixed. I know Mars is not in a fixed sign, but it's very, very concentrated, and it is square the midheaven. That is about her trying to make progress, and not just trying to make progress. She insists on making progress. Mars square midheaven, and you throw Uranus in there, and it is incredibly focused. But I'm just wondering, to what extent is she able to make sense of it all? And I'm thinking about her Venus in Virgo. Venus, this is as a side issue. I'm going to go back to that Mars Uranus when I look at some of the midpoints. But Venus in Virgo it's not well placed in Virgo. And her Venus and Mars are somewhat disconnected from the rest of her chart. Okay, the Mars hits the midheaven, but she's got Venus sextile Mars. She's got Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint. I think that Sun conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint makes her attractive and charismatic. Certainly that Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint has certainly helped her. And charismatic up to a point, of course. But remember, with Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint, Venus-Mars sextile, Venus-Mars, it can be quite focused attractiveness, focused charisma. Some people like it, some people don't. And so Venus in Virgo it's fallen in Virgo. Now, lots of people have Venus in Virgo, and everything is fine. It's not a problem having Venus in Virgo. Now, it may be that her Venus in Virgo is not particularly well integrated with her chart. That might be a problem with her Venus in Virgo. But I do think that the thing with Venus in Virgo, when it works badly, can just focus on the details. They can focus on the details. They can understand the surface appearances, but it sometimes is unable to go too deep, particularly in this chart when we do have issues with water and perhaps with empathy. And that links with the Moon conjunct Saturn, because you see, with Moon conjunct Saturn, the Moon represents her to an extent, but Saturn makes it rigid. And Saturn makes her perhaps unable to see what's happening around her, and it perhaps makes her unaware of some of the more complex emotional currents that she should be aware of. And that links with Venus in Virgo, looking at things from the perspective of the surface. And I suppose Venus in Virgo, Virgo is an earth sign, and so thinking about money and the surface accoutrements of wealth that come with status. So being a Hollywood star comes with having a lot of money and big houses. Being a member of a royalty comes with, again, with similar things. And so that Moon-Jupiter conjunction represents perhaps the good fortune that she has. I mean, someone who is very fortunate. And she's so fortunate that she has an opportunity to get thrown into two different worlds. She becomes a member of the royal family. And because of that, she becomes, for a time, I don't know, part of a Hollywood set, getting interviews with opera and so forth. And she's got all the surface details of the royal family sorted out, all the surface details of being a Hollywood personality sorted out. But it's Venus in Virgo, and it's Moon conjunct Saturn, and it's not something she grew up in. So Harry, for example, he understands the royal family because he was born into the royal family. Someone who is a Hollywood A-lister has, I suppose, they've worked through the acting profession. I mean, some of them just get it because of who they know, but by and large, they work through the acting profession and they get bigger parts and they get known, and so they develop it. And so by the time they become a Hollywood star, they understand the whole system. So likewise with Harry, understanding the whole system. And I think that in both cases, because she just arrived at it, she got the surface details sorted out, but she didn't have the fundamentals sorted out. That may be why she's got problems. She perhaps didn't fundamentally know how to understand how to behave as a royal, and she couldn't deal with that. She didn't really understand the underlying system, and it may be the same with Hollywood. Hollywood may actually be a more difficult system, a more difficult structure for an outsider to enter than even the royal family, because with the royal family there's an assumption that outsiders do have difficulty, and then maybe the royal family will kind of help someone from the outside and understand that some people just, in the face of royalty, they get dumbstruck. I mean, that can happen. And so with Hollywood, it's a similar thing. But Venus in Virgo, it's just something on the surface, and actually she doesn't know how to behave. And I suppose you could say that when she started to say things about the Queen and mock the Queen with her curtsying and all that stuff about the revelations to opera and whatever. If she's being so free about her confidences with the royalty, why would Hollywood trust her? Because if she's someone who's just going to reveal confidences left, right, and centre, well, that's how it's gonna happen. And maybe it was that Venus in Virgo just focused on things on the surface, and that was a problem. And again, Mars here shows that real desperation to be successful, and how completely pushy that Mars is. And remember that meridian chart, the Mars is on the first house cusp. Now, I did just want to have a look at some of the midpoints, and as always, I thought this was going to sort of get into real detail. Get into real detail, but of course I'm sort of running out of time, and I'm sure there's plenty of stuff I've missed. But her Saturn, if we look at some of her Saturn midpoints. There's her Saturn. You can see she's got Saturn conjunct the Moon and conjunct Jupiter. Now, one midpoint that she does have involving Saturn is on the Mars Aries and Midheaven Aries midpoint. So she's got the Midheaven Aries midpoint, the Mars Aries midpoint. That's about that Mars midheaven principle is her being desperate to be successful, to be someone. And then on the other side, you've got Aries. Aries is a world point. It's almost like the desperation to become a mega world celebrity. And so then Saturn is on that midpoint. So Saturn is actually providing, it's a degree of restriction. So she hits a limit. And of course the moon is linked with it as well. So Saturn is really messing things up for her. And so you can see that Mars midheaven, which is such an important part of her chart, on one hand, and then the Aries point, another global collective part of her chart, it comes together and Saturn is hitting it. And so Saturn is really creating a lot of problems there. And Saturn is also on the Hades Admetos midpoint. Yeah, Admetos is about delay. Hades can be quite a miserable influence, and being on that Hades Admetos midpoint, it really doesn't help. Admetos, is a king who in Greek mythology who didn't want to die, and he delayed things, and then it's hitting Hades. So that is a problem. And then there is the way she communicates. And in terms of communication, she has Mercury aspecting Cupido. So Cupido is another hypothetical planet. And let me just show you her Cupido. Her Cupido is at... where is her Cupido? So her Cupido is... where's Cupido gone? I'm going to lose Cupido. Cupido is... Cupido. She's got her Cupido at... Cupido as its symbol is a mixture between Venus and Jupiter. And so she's got her Cupido at 6/6 Scorpio. And it's about unions, finding connections between people. And her Mercury is at 5/36 Leo. So she's got Mercury square Cupido. And so going back to the dial, there is her Mercury conjunct Cupido. So with Mercury conjunct Cupido, it's the way she communicates. Probably the way she communicates at first, being able to communicate in a way when she meets someone for the first time, when she's trying to impress them, she's probably able to do a really good job. I mean, maybe it's because she's an actress, maybe she's just she just knows what to say. So you can imagine when she first met Harry, she would have known exactly what to say with that Mercury conjunct Cupido. But the problem with that Mercury Cupido, with that Mercury Cupido conjunction, is some of the midpoints it's on. And so the midpoint that I find quite impressive is there's her Mars midheaven midpoint. That's her being really sort of ambitious, but it's also on the Hades Mars, Hades midheaven midpoint. So that is a capacity. It's a capacity to say things which really are very attractive, can bring people in, but it's also the capacity to really alienate people, to say things which are really hurtful. And I think when one thinks about her comment about the Queen and mocking her, curtsying about the Queen, or everything said about the Queen, that might be how that part of the reason, that Mercury is, it works for her, but in the end it works against her. So, those are a few observations about her midpoints. But I mean, I think with the fundamental issue with Meghan, as far as I'm concerned, what I don't understand about Meghan, although I think astrology kind of helps us make a little more sense of it, is how is it that she doesn't seem to understand that the actions she is taking are so undermining, and what is it? And I think I would have said that it has a lot to do with that moon conjunct Saturn. That moon conjunct Saturn is very, very close, and it's almost like that Saturn is freezing things up, and the moon should be a form of communication, and that's how it should work, and a form of emotional communication, feeling the way things are around her. But Saturn is just blocking it, and Saturn, she just can't see it, and because she can't see it, then she's going to continue making mistakes. So that's certainly one way in which it could be working. Plus the fact that it's Mars square the midheaven. That Mars square the midheaven is, it's about on one hand, it's about the frantic desire to be successful. And clearly this is what she's doing, putting huge amounts of energy into being something. But does she actually know what she's striving for, what she's actually aiming for? And that Mars, it might be about her energy, but it's also about something that is projected, and it is about that emotion and that sensitivity being projected onto other people. And I mean, you could be more obvious about her and about her chart and try to understand why she doesn't get it. And it may simply be that it's her Leo planets. It just could be, I haven't talked about her Leo planets. Sun in Leo, Mercury in Leo. You would have expected with her chart for her to perhaps got more into that moon, for that moon in Libra to become more of who she was, but perhaps that sun is so domineering, it's so overwhelming that the sun in Leo can burn what it touches, and of course she's got a combust Mercury, so you could say that the sun conjunct Mercury is just preventing her from understanding things, getting things, because Mercury in Leo is trying to make sense of it all, but the sun in Mercury that sun has really combusted it. Now, just a few very short comments about what's happening right now. We had a full moon on January the 13th, and I think the full moon on January the 13th was really quite devastating for her, because I think with that full moon you started to get all of those accusations that she was a disaster Taurus, and you had the fact that that show with Love Meghan, or whatever it's called, got postponed until March the 4th. So the full moon has really, I think, hit her extremely hard. And as a note for the future, the thing that Meghan has to be really concerned about now is Saturn and Neptune. So Saturn and Neptune are both moving into Aries. They will move into Aries later this year. They will go retrograde. They will go back into Pisces. But in 2026, Saturn is in Aries. Saturn will be opposition her moon, opposition her Saturn, opposition her Jupiter, and then a few months later, Saturn will square her Mars. And that Mars is really, really critical. So in 2026, Saturn causes her huge problems, and Saturn is also opposition her Saturn. This is a generic cycle that when you have Saturn opposition your Saturn in one's 40s, it's a kind of it's Saturn opposition Saturn is that would be half a Saturn return. So we all have it in our sort of mid-40s, that Saturn opposition Saturn. She's going to get it, Saturn in Aries, and it's going to really, really hit the Mars in Cancer plus Moon, Saturn, and Jupiter. So she needs to sort things out pretty quickly in terms of those transits. And one often wonders, what should she do? What should she do? How should she get around this problem? Because I do think there is a problem, and I do think that the astrology really does highlight it, and I think one can get into it more. But I think that the moon conjunct Saturn and the Mars on the midheaven, the Mars square the midheaven, and the fact that the Mars is linked with Uranus, really are an issue. And I do think that Mars is projected, and it's just so interesting that Thomas Markle, her father, is a Cancerian, and yeah, I guess that he was a Cancerian simply by looking at Mars in her chart. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Meghan. Sorry for talking about Meghan again, but I just felt I really had to look at her chart one more time. That, by the way, is... Why is the midheaven there? What house system is that? That is equal. That, by the way, is the equal house system I'm looking at there. So I don't know why I've got the equal house system, but yeah, Mars square the midheaven, and the fact that she's got Uranus sesquiquadrate the midheaven. I mean, Uranus sesquiquadrate the midheaven is also difficult. Uranus is a very focused planet in its own way, and it's very individual. And so the fact she's got Mars square her midheaven, Uranus sesquiquadrate her midheaven, yeah, she's really anxious to be successful, but she does it in a very single-minded way, and that also explains why she can't actually see the bigger picture. She can't see the kind of impression she's having as she tries to move forward. Okay, that really is it. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm sorry to have talked about Meghan again, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.